Good morning, team. It's Natisha Rivera-Patrick, and I'm here today to talk to you about Chapter 6 and Chapter 7 of Creativity, Inc. So after this presentation, I hope that you will feel your time was well spent and that you've learned something. So let's go ahead and get started. Just to give you an overview of what we're going to cover, Chapter 6, we're going to look at failure and the perception of failure. We're going to talk about creating a fearless culture. We're going to look at iterative trial and error, and we're going to talk a little bit about trust. So failure is bad, right? That's what we've been taught from an early age. Failure is something to be ashamed of. And so it was enlightening in the reading to hear Ed talk about that failure it's an opportunity for growth. It's not necessarily something that's bad. As a matter of fact, it's encouraged. And so I found three quotes that I thought closely aligned with what my perception is of failure. And they're located on the slide below. But the first one says, failure is the opportunity to begin again, only more intelligently, meaning we do something wrong, hopefully we will learn from that mistake, and so we don't repeat that going forward. And I like this one, success is not final, failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. And I think sometimes in the moment we may feel that it is very much like a fatality, but we have to know that it has been a learning opportunity and be able to have the courage to move forward from that. And failure is proof that you tried. Now go try again. I think I practice that a lot with my children. You know, you have to try it. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Let's figure out another way and just not to give up and to help move it forward. So let's talk about the perception of failure. So let's think about failure differently. Failure, when approached properly, can be an opportunity for growth. Mistakes are not evil, but rather the inevitable consequence of doing something new, and as such should be seen as valuable. Failure is an important part of learning. Failure is painful. We have to recognize both the reality of the pain and the benefits of the resulting growth. And in that moment, I think that can also be difficult. Failure is the manifestation of learning and exploration. And so in the story in Chapter 6, Ed was talking about a conversation that he was having with Steve Jobs. And they were working on Toy Story 3, and Steve was asking how the production was going. He was basically saying that it was flawless, that they were having no issues, to which Steve replied, "Be careful." And he cautioned, and the point that came out of that was, if you aren't experiencing failure, then you're making a far worse mistake. You're being driven by the desire to avoid it. And for leaders, trying to avoid failure by outthinking it dooms you to fail. So think a little bit about that. If we always work trying to avoid it, we might fail at what it is we're trying to do. So creating a fear-based culture. What happens when an error is discovered within your current environment? Are your first thoughts that you personally failed? Do you start to place blame on self? Do you come together as a group to work out the cause of the problem and potential solutions? Does fault have to be associated with an individual? Do we have to find somebody to place blame on? If the answer is yes to these questions, then you are in a fear-based, failure-averse culture. So in looking at fear-based versus fearless, let's talk a little bit about different things that happen in each of these environments. So in a fear-based culture, people will consciously or unconsciously avoid risk. So they're going to stick to the status quo. They're going to do what they've always done for fear of repercussions if things don't go as planned. So creativity is often stifled. Whereas in a fearless culture, they're less hesitant to explore new areas. They're willing to delve into the unknown. Failure is seen as a means of leading to finding a better option. Experimentation is seen as necessary and fact-finding mission. And so I think for us as leaders, we have the opportunity to make failure into something people can face without fear. As leaders, we can talk about mistakes and our part in them. We make it safe for others to express if they've ever made an error, or to be transparent and honest if something has occurred. That way things can be addressed and hopefully remedied at that point. And by accepting and not running, you allow others the opportunity to do the same. So being transparent, being open to and inviting enough that your staff can come to you and say, you know what, I messed up, or I made a mistake, and hopefully they're also coming with you with a solution to how to fix that error. Iterative trial and error is when experimentation is seen as necessary and productive, not as a frustrating waste of time, People will enjoy their work even when it is confounding them. This is long recognized and used through the ages in science. Scientists have a question, they construct a hypothesis, they test it, they analyze it, they draw their own conclusions, and then they do it all over again. And the reason that they do that is experiments provide the opportunity for greater understanding. So you try things, you get one result. You try it again, you may get a totally different result. So being open to different ways of doing things. And I think for myself and my profession, that's something that I have struggled with, being a very strong personality. It was often my way or no way. And so as I've gotten older, I've gotten more open to the fact and the understanding that we can get to the same result even if we take a different path. And so being more open to and more patient with allowing others to construct that path on their own. Any outcome is a good outcome because it yields new information. So whatever it is we're finding out, whether it's the answer that we wanted or we know that we don't want to go down that path again, it's provided us some valuable information. And it's easier to justify in science than in the business world because, let's face it, failure can be expensive. So there's two parts to failure. The event itself, with all its attendant disappointment, confusion, and shame, sometimes we wallow in that, and our reaction to it. This is what we can control, not only for ourselves, but for people we may be supervising. So how we react in these situations is very important. So getting the most out of failure as leaders, we should think of ourselves as teachers and try to create companies in which teaching is seen as a valued way to contribute to the success of the whole. Facing failure allows for better understanding, the removal of barriers to full creative engagement, the biggest of which is fear. So let's talk a little bit about fear and the fact that we must uncouple fear and failure. We don't want them to really be associated with each other. Trust. Trust is the antidote to fear. Fear and trust are powerful forces. Trusting others doesn't mean that they won't make mistakes. It means that if they do, you trust that they will act to help solve it. So as we talked about earlier, if someone has made a mistake and can fess up to that, we hope that they're also coming with some type of solution or suggestion of a solution of how we can make it better and make it right. Fear can be created quickly. Trust can't. Be patient, be authentic, be consistent, and the trust will come. Managers tend to like secrecy. This often makes others distrust them, and I think we see that a lot in whether it's for-profit or non-profit sector. Managers tend to be tight-lipped about things or feel that they only need to share a limited amount of information, and that's something that I've always struggled with too. My roles have always been such where I need to know. I'm the fundraiser for our organization, so anything going on in all facets I need to be privy to in order to be effective in my role. So while there's a fine line and there are certainly things that are confidential or on a need-to-know basis, being secret with everything simply doesn't work, and it doesn't help to build a healthy relationship amongst peers. So just a recap of Chapter 6. Guess what, guys? We're all human. Guess what else? We're all going to make mistakes. We can control how we react to mistakes. As managers, we need to be authentic and embrace a mistake-making environment. I can say that where I'm currently at, that's encouraged. We're a small enough organization that it's a learning environment, and so if something happens and things don't go the way you planned, that's okay. We're going to come together, we're going to fix that. No one is penalized. Now, that's not to say people go out and blatantly go rogue. Of course, that's not what we're talking about when your goal is to assume people's intentions are good and that they want to solve problems, not create them. So, you give responsibility. That means you let mistakes happen and you let people help fix them. Management's job is not to prevent risk, but to build the ability to recover. That's a powerful statement, and it's something that's very hard to do. So let's go ahead and move into Chapter 7, the Hungry Beast and the Ugly Baby. So we're going to take a look at the beast, ugly babies, the beast versus the baby, protection and engagement, and healthy conflict. So first, let's talk about the beast and feeding the beast. Catmull's reference to the beast refers to any large group that needs to be fed an uninterrupted diet of new material and resources in order to function. Disney experiences after many successful releases, ultimately resulting in movies that were subpar, none opening at #1 at the box office from 1994 to 2010. It's a huge stint. So Catmull took note of how the employees who focused on the need to feed the beast directly contributed to this decline, and he made note of that in the way that he was helping operate Pixar. And so Ugly Babies refers to, or is equal to, originality. It's fragile, and it's in its earliest moments often far from pretty. Catmull coined this term to refer to early mock-ups of their Pixar films. Catmull stated that they are truly ugly, awkward, unformed, vulnerable, and incomplete. So that means they needed nurturing in the form of time and patience in order to grow. So in balancing the beast versus the baby, ugly babies have a hard time coexisting with the beast. The ugly baby idea is not an easy one to accept. Many people often assume that Pixar movies just popped out completely finished. You see that final product, and of course that's how they must have started, but it couldn't be more far from the truth. So his goal in talking about ugly babies is to protect the baby from being judged too quickly, protecting the new, the idea. When efficiency or consistency of workflow are not balanced by other equally strong countervailing forces, the result is that new ideas, or ugly babies, they don't grow. The beast is a glutton, but also a valuable motivator. So in looking to push work and to create workload and to create product, we have to be able to balance this. The baby is pure and unsullied, full of potential, but also needy and unpredictable. And in the text, it talked about how it will also keep you up late at night. So they must coexist peacefully. This requires you to keep various forces in balance. Protection and engagement. While the word protection typically has a positive connotation, that isn't always the case. Protection can be misguided and used to protect processes that are comfortable and familiar, but don't necessarily make sense. The goal being to not disrupt what already is. Catmull uses this term somewhat differently. He says that when somebody hatches an original idea, it may be ungainly and poorly defined, but it is also the opposite of established and entrenched, and that is precisely what is most exciting about it. Without protection, naysayers who fail to see its potential or lack the patience to let it evolve, it could be destroyed. So oftentimes if someone comes to you with an idea, if we just automatically dismiss it, we never know what that truly could have created because we didn't give it the opportunity. We simply shut it down at the onset. And so creating an environment where it's encouraged, and you may go down that path and decide it's not what you want to do, or you may go down that path and it may be one of the best things that you've ever done. But allowing the time for that to take form and to take shape will give you a better opportunity of success, or finding out if you can be successful. So a recap of Chapter 7. We mustn't get so caught up in trying to feed the beast that we neglect the ugly babies. Originality is fragile. Ideas must be nurtured. You must create a balance between the beast and the ugly baby. Making something great is ultimately your goal. Protection has many meanings, and we can hide behind it to keep ourselves safe. That's doing that status quo. That's allowing that fear to control and manipulate what it is we're willing to try that's new to move us forward. As long as our intentions, our values remain constant, our goals can be shifted as needed. Really, there's not too many things that are set in stone. Protection of the new, of the future, not the past, must be a conscious effort. So with that, my question that I will leave you with today is, what is the one thing you have always wanted to do, but fear has kept you from pursuing? So think about that. If fear wasn't an issue, what's something whether it's from something silly from your childhood, whether it's as an adult, something you would love to pursue, but the fear is just overwhelming to the point that you won't even give it a try. You won't dip your toe in that water. So think about that. I hope you felt your time was well spent, and I look forward to hearing from you all. Thank you.